point. Professor Swaran Singh, talking about Indian. Here you have an Indian of Indian origin is the best way of describing Zohra Mamdani. He has himself gone on many anti-Modi rants. In fact, a coalition of Indian, American, and Hindu diaspora organizations across the US has strongly condemned Mamdani for what it described as Hindu-phobic actions and statements. In fact, Mamdani opposed the construction of Ram Mandir in Ayodhya. In 2020, Mamdani reportedly attended a rally where organizers used anti-Hindu slurs, and this is the person of Indian origin. And think of all the huge Indian community in New York and across the US who are watching this.
I agree with you. Some of his comments, particularly during his primaries to be nominated as a Democratic mayoral candidate, had made a splash in Indian media in terms of his views on Hinduism and some of such issues. But I think what makes him most interesting is that he's unusually young to be potentially the youngest mayor of New York ever. And therefore, what he's campaigning are very interesting issues. He's talking of New York politics being dominated by big money and small ideas and old politics of corruption and so on. And some of the elements do reflect parts of the current Indian politics, talking about giving free bus rides, for example, or controlling the renting in New York. And then in that sense, appealing to the relatively poorer sections of New York. So there are mixture of his being young, which makes him very noticeable, his being immigrant, which again is something that Trump has very different policy on, his being Muslim, and of course, the whole context of New York being a kind of a big apple and a hotspot of multiculturalism in that sense. So that makes him really unusually media savvy, media headlines drawing kind of a mayoral candidate. And what adds fuel to the fire, if I want to look at it that way, is unprecedented intervention of the federal government. The Justice Department recently dropping charges on the mayor, which is currently the mayor and soon to be former Eric Adams. And then, people are saying maybe there's a deal. He's exiting now the kind of contest. And of course, above all, you quoted President Trump, making personal aspersions, threatening to cut off funding. This has never happened in American politics, even if we say that New York mayoral contest is not limited to just local issues. It involves national issues, and as a mayor, he can influence national debates on many issues. So, in many ways, the election tomorrow is going to be something of an unusual of a kind. And I believe that the trends as of now, despite the kind of margins are reducing, because after exit of Eric Adams, and therefore I think the sidelining gradually by President himself of his own Republican candidate Curtis Silva, the margins between Mamdani and the follow-up candidate, now that we talk of Silva, is really reducing in that sense. So I think in some ways it is interesting, but also New York.
In fact, we have some data on it, Professor Swaran Singh. According to the Professor Swaran Singh, we will know the answer in about 24 to 48 hours from now when the elections are done and dusted, and that's when we will be having a different set of questions to ask. If assuming that Zohra Mamdani wins, we have a certain number of questions to ask, and if Zohra Mamdani doesn't win, and then the question is how did it happen that a man who's been the front runner in the entire build up to the election till the last day ends up losing the election on the last day, and then there'll be fingers pointed, isn't it?
I think two things. One, because New York, as all of us are saying, is a democratic state, and New York mayors have often been democratic. And right now, there is a certain amount of discomfiture with President Trump and the way he runs his affairs, and the way he's indulging with Mamdani and the mayoral elections in New York, I think would ensure that Mamdani will win. What we are saying is that the margins, which were kind of unusually impressive in the beginning, have shrunk over a period of time. Between Mamdani and Cuomo, now the margins could be relatively less, but I think there is still likelihood of Mamdani becoming the next mayor. If President Trump follows up with deploying National Guards in New York, or cutting all the funding, or using other departments that he has to unleash some kind of anti-Mamdani tirade, that will only be disengaging, sort of, or engaging him in certain unusual, unproductive way of things that can happen. But I think this also is important to underline that Mamdani's comments that have rattled some of people in India may not continue. See, during elections, candidates say all kinds of things to ensure that they make a splash, they get media coverage, they become more attractive, and then Mamdani
Election
uses social
bazi.
media.
It's all
Social
election
media.
bazi by